My name is Carson Seelman, and this is On Air with Heritage Action, a podcast built for conservatives. Twice a week, we break down some of the most important issues facing our country and talk about how you can get involved today in the fight for conservative values.
Hello, and welcome to On Air with Heritage Action. I'm Thad Brock, and in an episode a couple of weeks ago, I talked about the fight over spending in Congress before the September 30th deadline. Democrats and Republicans, they were able to pass a continuing resolution to the budget, and now the new deadline is December 16th, which sets up an omnibus package to happen during the lame duck session of Congress. Now, for listeners unfamiliar with the lame duck session, that's the period of time between when a new Congress is elected and when they're sworn into office. And today we're joined by Ryan Walker, the Vice President of Government Relations for Heritage Action. And he is going to talk us through the lame duck session, what it is, what kind of legislation we can expect to be considered, and how the grassroots movement like you can get involved. So Ryan, with the last week's midterms, giving conservatives back the House, can you explain what happens next in this lame duck session and how the election is going to change the dynamics of the next few weeks?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So as we all know, on Tuesday, the country turned out to vote, and we believe there's still counting votes across the country. So bear with us as we try to navigate those waters. But we believe that there will be a Republican majority in the House. So members will come back in this time period between November and the end of December to finish up the work of Congress here in this last 6-week period. The problem, though, is that these members don't necessarily have a mandate. In fact, a number of them might not be serving anymore. So the argument that we have against legislating in the lame duck is that the American people have given a new mandate to Congress. They have given new leadership, especially in the House of Representatives, elected new leadership. And so we believe that this period of time, there should be as little done on the legislative agenda as possible. You do the bare minimum, right? And that is all so that the will of the people can be reflected in that legislation come January.
Okay, and it seems like the left is going to try to pass a lot of significant legislation during this period, namely an omnibus. We've been talking about the no lame duck legislating over the past few weeks and months, but it seems more likely that Democrats in Congress are going to try to move forward with this. Where are we in the omnibus process right now, and is all of that is it at all possible if we could get a CR over a full omnibus appropriations package?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So Democrats, because they know they won't have a majority in the House now, are very adamant on passing full government funding that would run through September of next year. Not only would the bill continue government funding into September and not give Republicans an adequate chance to weigh in their new leadership position in the House, but it would also fund leftist priorities, right? It would continue to fund all these programs.
Can you talk to us a little bit about those policies?
Yeah, so if we remember what the Biden administration has done over the past 2 years in particular, they have found new authorities for agencies. They have passed funding plus-ups to various programs, green energy programs. They've added SOGI language to the appropriations bills. They have taken gendered language out of the appropriation bills. They've changed the way that they describe pregnant women to pregnant people. All sorts of left-leaning priorities are baked into the omnibus. And the omnibus is so large and it refers back to so many statutes that it's hard for members to navigate all of that at once. And you're often given the omnibus with less than 24 hours, if you're lucky, 36 hours to consider that. And it's all sort of baked in and sort of put in places where it's hard to find. And so we're very adamant that a CR be the recommended funding mechanism for Congress. That way we can continue the government's functioning through December and through the Christmas period. So no one is put in a bad spot because of that. But it would give Republicans the chance come January, February, or March to weigh in and have their priorities heard, to cut some of the spending that's unnecessary and is bloating and contributing to the inflation problem we're all seeing. Again, yes, it's possible. It will take a concerted effort from grassroots activists like us, an intense lobbying effort in the House and the Senate. But listen, there are a large number of retiring members on both the House and the Senate side. And again, Democrats have majorities in the House and a split Senate. So that the battle is uphill. I don't want to sugarcoat it, but it's something that we should insist on.
Mm-hmm. So now I want to dive into Ukraine funding, which could possibly be the upwards of $50 billion. That's billion with a B. Heritage Action has previously been opposed to this blank check style of funding that the left keeps pushing for because a lack of clear vision and strategy and a lack of oversight and accountability for this money. According to news reports, Biden has requested funding, which would go to a whole host of items, including direct funding for the Ukrainian government for their operations. And this is in addition to the tens of billions of dollars that the U.S. has already spent trying to defend Ukraine. What kinds of concerns should conservatives have about this? And do you hold the same concerns this go around?
Yes, I do. I think this is probably one of the most important fights in the omnibus, and I'm glad that you brought this up. The president recently sent a request to Congress this morning. The total request is for $47.7 billion. Part of that is for emergency aid for natural disasters around the country, something that, while it could be budgeted for in regular appropriations, it's something the public and we certainly understand the need for. We probably have contention on the level of that funding and it not being budgeted. There are mechanisms that we can use to prioritize emergency spending, but even worse, if that wasn't enough for us to oppose that package, the Ukraine aid is and should be. The Ukraine aid is more than $30 billion. A large chunk of that goes to direct economic aid to the Ukrainian government. It will pay salaries, pensions, the functioning of agencies and administrations within the Ukrainian government, some of which the American people, at least, have no insight into how they operate, what they spend their money on, and we're not getting transparent reports from our government about how that money is being spent. So in total, if this request is accepted, the amount of dollars that the United States has sent to Ukraine since the beginning of Ukraine's internal problems goes north of $90 billion, which is an unbelievable amount of money. This request alone is more than the combined budgets of the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Interior annually. So this is not a small and insignificant sum. Some will have you believe that. This is not the economic aid in particular is rife for abuse. And while we certainly understand that there are memos of understanding that the Ukrainian government has signed with the United States, that does not mean that this is a foolproof program and that there is not abuse within the system. And on top of that, our European supposed partners are not contributing anything near the level that the United States and taxpayers, you all, are contributing to the Ukrainian effort. So our position is, listen, we need to come back to the table. We need to talk about and debate these issues openly and in the public, on the Senate floor, on the House floor. We need to have transparent reports that are regularly published, telling and detailing where this money goes. You know, if the American people can't have oversight and accountability for this money, their dollars being spent abroad, I think that's a bridge too far. And that's the position that we have here at Heritage Action. And we're going to be advocating for that funding to come out of the omnibus and be considered on its own merits.
Wow. Powerful, really. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about the other issues that we're seeing in the lame duck session. Let's talk about the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. What is it? What is that legislation, and how has Heritage Action been involved?
Yeah, so the bill, its proponents would argue that the legislation is meant to provide protections against discrimination for pregnant women in the workplace in particular. It would require that companies offer reasonable accommodations for those pregnant women in the workplace, assuming that they can adequately perform the job duties that they are assigned. Now, the problem, though, is that there are no religious liberty protections in this legislation. And that's important because there are religious institutions, churches, universities, religious groups across the country that have sincerely held religious beliefs against things like abortion. Abortion is an aspect of this bill that would need coverage. Individuals working at a Catholic charity would all of a sudden be empowered to require that charity to give them time off or accommodations to go and get abortions or pregnancy care that may not be in line with the religious organization's beliefs. And so it would impose a federal viewpoint on this on those institutions, and there's not adequate protection at this time in that legislation to ensure that those institutions and those organizations are not negatively impacted by this. And listen, those are sincerely held religious beliefs, right? That is based in their scripture and what they believe and adhere to. And we as a country have decided that is a protection that should be provided for all religious believers. And so, I think that we have serious concerns about this legislation passing, and we believe that it might be included in the omnibus. Another reason why these big bloated government funding bills all of a sudden become everybody's wish list of their favored projects and their favored legislation. And oftentimes that means, the more moderate proposals, the left-leaning proposals, the liberal stuff that sounds good on paper, and folks don't have enough time to dive deep and understand its implications.
Nice. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk defense. The NDAA is, of course, a really big one. And the Heritage Foundation just recently came out with their rating of the U.S. military as weak. What needs to happen to this bill in order to make sure that the military and our troops, they get what they need?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Democrats, especially in the House of Representatives, are very focused on making sure that in their view, and I disagree with this wholeheartedly, but in their view, they want to make sure that their social agenda is inserted into the DoD, right? That that there's adequate services for abortion, that they can pay for and provide travel benefits to service members to go and seek those services. And the legislation has no accountability for Afghanistan and the withdrawal that the Biden administration fumbled. I think is being nice. It does not have any notion towards readiness and making sure that our military is truly prepared for the next few decades. And I think that's really important. China is a rising power, as we all know. We've seen it on the news every single day. They're talking about invading Taiwan. The military needs our support right now. And beyond that, I think it is really centered around the left's idea that they want to insert their social agenda into the warrior community. And that is wrong-headed. It is the wrong approach. And we will push back on that at all levels and angles that we can. A very good example of this is the Senate version of the NDAA includes draft our daughters language. And if that is not a quintessential example of what the left wants to insert into the military, I'm not quite sure what is.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of our citizens and grassroots have been heavily engaged on removing the draft our daughters provision from the NDAA. Where does the bill currently stand with draft our daughters?
Yeah, the Senate version has the language in it. The House version, though, does not. We fought very hard to make sure, working with the Republican ranking member on the committee, to let our voices be known that is a policy too far, especially in this environment. And when we know that the world is is actively engaged in conflict and China is rearing its head across the Pacific. And so, this is not what we need to be focused on right now. There are so many more details of the NDAA that need to be solved, how many ships we have, the troop strength, repair depots, base efficiency, making sure that we have the right equipment for our military service members, all of those things, making sure that we rebuild some of our ammo and stockpiles from the transfers that we've sent over to Ukraine. I think that's a real consideration. Now, the military plans for that, so they do have plans for accommodating that, but I think it's necessary that we look into those things and make sure that we're adequately prepared for the fights that are coming.
Yeah, of course. And, we've been talking a lot about the different bills and the proposals that will likely come out of the lame duck session, but let's zoom out a little bit and think about a couple things. At Heritage Action, we've been vocally opposed to major legislation passing through a lame duck session because we believe that elections give Congress a new mandate from the people to govern with new leaders and a new vision. And I know you mentioned that a little bit earlier in the podcast, but it's really important to understand that, especially when it comes to appropriation bills. We want the new Congress to draft the new appropriation bills openly and transparently while reasonably advancing good policies. What would you like to add to that as we now enter the lame duck session?
Listen, the American people have spoken. We may not know the entire results of the election, but we do have a good idea that Republicans will take back the House. Republicans have a very different view, as we all know, on how the country should go. Conservatives, in particular, in the House are empowered now. The numbers just dictate that is the reality. So we are in favor of pushing the appropriations deadline to next Congress into March, perhaps, so that those Republican members can have an input, can draft the legislation themselves, and most importantly, have a seat at the negotiating table. Right now, the negotiations for the omnibus are handled by Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and Mitch McConnell when they need 10 Republicans in the Senate to hop on board. And maybe not even Mitch McConnell, right? They may just go directly to those, many of them retiring members for support. So again, retiring members, a new leadership in the House of Representatives, that all means that the Congress, the new Congress, the 118th, should be dictating all of these policy positions. They should have a say. They should have a seat at the negotiating table. And right now they don't. And the will of the people in that regard is being ignored. So we are fundamentally opposed, and we will key vote a number of bills, much of what we've talked about here today, this lame duck period, to show the American people and to call out those representatives and senators who are helping advance these policies and get them to Biden's desk.
Nice. And of course, we've got a lot of activists and a lot of Sentinels listening on the line. What can they do to encourage their representatives to advance good conservative policies during this lame duck session and beyond?
Yeah, this is something I've joined many of you at the Sentinel Summit down in Texas recently. I've spoken with a number of you. I've been on the Sentinel Strategy Call on Mondays. We need to do more of what we have been doing. You all have been so effective in calling, writing, organizing, showing up at offices, demanding meetings, letting your voice be heard. You need to continue to do that. Something I've really gotten into is this idea of developing your own community, developing those bonds and relationships with your neighbors, like-minded friends and family that are in and of your community. Build numbers and show up and speak out. Write a letter that is signed by 36 of your constituents and closest friends and send it to your senator. Build those direct contacts with your elected representatives. Demand that they meet with your groups locally and hear them out and press them on these issues that we're talking about today. Because without the lobby of the American people, we don't have much. The people can have their voices heard in Congress if they are loud enough and frequent enough and they have large enough numbers. So I encourage you to do that work. It is hard work. It is yeoman's work. It is the right work, but it is organizing, finding those individuals who are passionate about the future of our country, the direction we're going in, and they want to stop the madness that is the Biden administration and the left that has run Congress for the past 2 years. We've all seen it. We've all experienced it. We're all feeling the pain of inflation and crime. And the list goes on. Immigration, foreign policy, the list goes on and on and on. So make that convincing case to your friends and show up and tell your representatives you're not going to stand for this anymore.
Yeah, that's really encouraging, Ryan. And if you want to build that sense of community that Ryan was just talking about, you can look more into our Sentinel program. We've got the link to we've got the link in the description. But if you also want to just text join to 51776, you can learn more about the Sentinel program that way. Thank you again, Ryan Walker, Vice President of Government Relations for Heritage Action, for joining us on this podcast and helping us understand and digest the lame duck session of Congress.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's an important conversation.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
That's it for another episode of On Air with Heritage Action. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you heard in today's episode, please click the follow button. If you want to receive a text message each time a new episode airs, text podcast to 51776 and you'll never miss an episode. That's podcast to 51776. Hi, it's me again, and we need your help. If you like the insights and activist resources we are providing, please take 1 minute and help us spread the word. Share this episode with friends and family on social media, email, or text. We need everyone's help in the fight to hold Washington accountable. And don't forget, you are also able to subscribe and listen to episodes on your smartphone. Just open up your favorite podcast app and search for On Air with Heritage Action. Click subscribe and download episodes so that you can take them with you on the go. It's the best way to make sure you never miss a thing. Thanks.